Hello, I'm Tom Westover. Before I get started here, I just want to show you a picture of this building. It has absolutely nothing to do with what I'm going to talk about, but I just thought it was cool. It's by a street artist named Pita. It's a building in Germany. The overall premise of my talk is not too complicated. As we gain more knowledge, we become aware of the depth of our ignorance. And in particular, this gives us a vision in this field to not only the variability, but also the uncertainty that goes along with everything that we call a recommendation. So we go over time through our careers, we gain experience and we gain this insight, hoping that we're going to feel better, but we kind of end up maybe feeling a little bit worse. So my goal today is to talk about a couple things to help us all kind of overcome that unease and figure out what we can do to feel better about it. Experience is really our ability to extract information from time. And human beings just in general are sort of bad at time and understanding time. Even though we literally cannot experience a single moment without some time passing, we're just bad at recollecting it. We make up facts to make ourselves feel better and kind of support our egos. We forget certain things to kind of make our failures go away. And so we lose that information. One way to demonstrate that is just a quick show of hands. How many people remember when the movie Forrest Gump came out? Some of you could probably even name the year. But what if I told you that the movie Forrest Gump came out closer to the moon landing than it did to today? You probably have more detail in your mind between now and when Forrest Gump came out than between Forrest Gump and the moon landing. In a kind of a similar way, this is Pont du Gard. This is an aqueduct in southern France that was built in the 1st century of the Common Era. And the Romans are as old to us now as the Egyptians were to the Romans. And we just don't have a good sense of that time and all the information that was lost over that time. So how do we recapture that? How do we use that to make ourselves feel a little bit better about all this uncertainty that we deal with? And one of the best ways is to teach and to learn. So teaching and learning are lenses that we can apply to an individual project to be able to understand better what we're actually trying to figure out in there. When we teach, meaning that we have to take some abstract concept and describe it to someone in the context of a project, when we do that, things that are going to stand out are things where we maybe don't understand the concept, or things where that doesn't exactly apply to this project, or things that we don't know about this project. So teaching is going to highlight some of those uncertainties and give you an idea of really what there is to know about the project. On the same way, when you're on the learning side of something, when someone's describing it to you, if you forget everything you know about it and then just try to learn from them as they're teaching, gaps in your comprehension of what they're actually telling you and how you understand it are also going to highlight things that are worthy of some more study within the topic. For those that have been at this profession a while, if you are sitting on a pile of knowledge and you are not teaching it, you are not building a monument, you are building a tomb. I just want to remind everyone that delegation is not the same thing as mentoring. If I were to give you a task and then in a couple weeks give you a task that is incrementally harder, that doesn't really accomplish the same thing. Teaching is difficult. Teaching is hard. And it's not because you have to say the things that you know, but it's because you have to say them in a way that the person you're trying to teach can understand. And that's just another reason why every firm and every group benefits from having diversity, because that variety of opinions, that variety of history, that variety of experience is a way that can really help you vet out your projects. When you're first starting out in your career, it's sort of like an aqueduct, right? There's water flows from one side to the other, but there's no way for water to get from one side to the other without going through the middle. There's no book that you can read about experience and then have it. You have to go through it. You have to experience it. And you can understand in theory how a tieback works. You can know the math, but until you're standing out in knee-deep mud and watching two guys lift 300 pounds of steel 1,000 times a day, you don't really understand how it gets built. And it's important to understand how things are built and to learn those things. When you're doing construction inspection, Sometimes it gets kind of boring. And at those times, you really need to look around and figure out what is the experience, what is the knowledge that I can draw from this time? Because that's when you figure out how things are constructed, not in an overall infrastructure sense, but really in a day-by-day, shift-by-shift, how do things get constructed? And when you move into being a designer, that type of knowledge is essentially a superpower. You're going to work with people that don't have that knowledge, that weren't able to extract that information, and you're just able to do so much better designs, so much easier, so much cheaper, because you understand really how things get done. The next thing that we can do to help alleviate some of our unease is to ask ourselves, how am I wrong? And the question in our field is not, am I wrong? The question is, how am I wrong? There's a tendency when you first come out of school and start in your career, you want to do analyses. You want to get a problem and put some data together and build a model and then, come up with some solutions. But, having data and some neat software and a constitutive model is not an analysis. Those are the ingredients for a calibration. Really what you need to do then is, you need to poke and prod and test and wiggle that model around to figure out where it works and where it doesn't, the things that it does well and the things that it doesn't. As Bruce Cutter was saying yesterday, do you understand your model over the domain of the solutions? Do you understand really what it's trying to do? That's a much different process and a much different thing than giving a model what we know and expecting us to tell us what we don't know. Forrest Gump has a lot of great quotes, right? Life is like a box of chocolates, all those other ones. I think in our field, none of them applies better than this one. Whether you are 3 years into your career or 30, if you are so certain about what the answer is when you start on a project, your monkey brain is going to recreate and make all of these different facts support that. You really need to be very open and very critical, figuring out, how am I wrong? How am I getting this wrong? Understand the consequences. What if the materials are stiffer? What if they're stronger? What if they're softer? What if they're weaker? As the systems that we try to model become more complex, our ability to understand the consequences of individual decisions rapidly degrades. If I'm just thinking about a material that has a certain strength and I want to be conservative, and so I make it a little softer, or I have a material that has a certain stiffness and I make it a little bit softer, that's going to change things in the way that my model works. It's going to move load around, and there's no guarantee because I was conservative in thinking about one particular parameter that the model is now moving load around correctly in magnitude or in space or in time. And so it's important to think about these consequences in a really open and objective way, asking, how am I wrong? Asking everybody else, how am I wrong? As you think about ways to understand your model better. And it's not about doubt in your own abilities or fear of those consequences. It's really just an exercise in order to highlight and understand the type of uncertainty that you're working with. The last point has less to do with the project and more to do with you as a person in that project, and it has to do with input and output. So if you're competent in your profession and you work for a good organization, you're going to get a steady stream of input in the form of engineering problems, and you're going to be expected to create a steady stream of output in the form of engineering solutions. But to run that machine takes additional input, takes additional energy. And no matter how much you like your job, it's not going to provide enough to keep that machine running. If you work in a public works project, you can do a great job and just be prepared that probably about 75% of the public is going to hate you for it. And it's either because you spent their tax money in a way that they don't exactly agree with, or you minorly inconvenienced them with a detour at some point, or the number of feet that you allocated for the bike lane was either too large or too small, or sometimes they just don't like the way your face looks. There's nothing you can do about it. It's not gonna. Your job can be fulfilling, but it's not gonna provide you enough input, extra input, to be able to put into this to really be creative. The things that you need to do are add other things. Go for a hike, bake some bread, read a book, listen to music. It doesn't matter what it is. Look at art, make art. Try to find a way to give yourself the space to be creative in your personal sense, And that'll allow you to have the vision to be creative in a professional sense. I'm giving a talk at one of the Minnesota sessions tomorrow about how we took a normal construction material, we're using it way outside of its normal stress strain range in order to isolate a buried drinking water reservoir from a landslide. And if all you're doing is shuffling input to output and just moving those things across without adding something else into that mix, those types of creative solutions don't really occur to you. And so it's an important thing to do, and that insight into other aspects, into other areas of your life will make you a better peer at work, it'll make you a better partner, it'll make you a better person. So, you know, make the most of the experience that you have coming up, maintain a positive outlook going forward, teach to anybody you can, learn from everybody, whether they're older or younger, wherever they're from, whatever they're talking about, see what you can learn. Question the things that you're doing and the people that you're talking with, open and objectively, to try to understand better what you're doing and where the uncertainties lie. You know, the bravest person in any room is the one who can stand up and say, I don't understand why that's right or why that occurs. Have that courage to be the person that questions and that says, I don't understand. And lastly, if you feed your mind things outside of work, it'll help you be better at the things that you do. Thank you.